Well, thanks y'all for being here. And since this is a topic of group decision making, I would like to ask the group, what do you all think of those times when you work with groups? Feel free to either put yourself off mute and share verbally or put some thoughts in the chat. I'd love to hear when you have a group project that you are assigned to work with at work. Does that energize you? Does that deflate you? Does that make you feel excited, nervous? How do you feel working with others?
Was that directed at me?
That's directed to the group. So yeah, go ahead, Eric, share.
Um, I enjoy that. I like the collaboration piece quite a bit, and I often find that I'm asking the wrong question and I don't have the right frame. And by talking it through a little bit, uh, I feel much better because the group tends to go more in the right direction and figure out what the right question is.
Interesting. Okay. Awesome. So the group helps shape your thinking a little bit and almost crystallize it or point you in the right direction. Ooh, I'm seeing mixed
So
results in the chat.
yeah, I hi, this is Mallet. And I've work in investing, and I've seen investment committees, and sometimes the depending on how it's set up, it may not always be it doesn't seem like the best decision making hygiene if you don't have procedures in place to allow for accounting for biases or accounting for different hierarchical like titles and potentially swaying um, or inadvertently silencing different opinions, etc. So I think it can work well. You can leverage the power of collective experience in its best form, but if you don't have guardrails in place, group decision making can be very difficult and counterproductive.
That's very true. Yep. It's also, I'm seeing some things in the chat that seem to reflect also the like the degree to which groups are fun. So like some people are saying like group my colleagues are awesome. So like it's almost like an enjoyable experience to work. Like fun is an added part of the experience. And then others are describing, a real drain on things and it can be annoying. Yeah. Mark.
Yeah, I guess along those lines, I'm a statistician or a retired statistician, and working with them, they're good problem solvers, and so um, it makes it really good to collaborate where we're trying to figure something out, right? Than see who's getting it right.
Yeah. Yeah, to see how it plays out in different groups. Yeah, I love asking this question because I think there's an emotional aspect to working with groups that I think needs to be recognized that can be both positive emotions or not so positive emotions, but I think there is an emotional component to it. I also think that, as with many, many things, there's also a little bit of confirmation bias happening in group work. And so, if you are somebody who has had positive group experiences before, then that might shape the way you go into other group experiences. And if you are somebody who has had really terrible group experiences, then anytime that you collaborate with others, you could be bringing that into the space as well. And then, as others have said, there are some systems and structures and protocols that you can put in place to help maximize the chances that your group will work effectively. I'm going to challenge everybody on the call to wear multiple hats during this time. So everybody, I believe, that is on this call right now is an adult. And so within your work as an adult, whether that's your professional work or your work in your family, your civic organizations you're a part of, I hope that the things that we'll talk about today will enable you to have more positive group experiences as an adult in your world. But then also, you all have young people in your lives, whether you're a teacher of students, or you might be a parent or guardian or volunteer leader. And I encourage you also to be thinking about how the things that we'll discuss today can not only benefit you as an adult, but also how can we empower students with these things, because they do a lot of group work as well, both formally in the classroom as well as not so formally otherwise. So be thinking about those as we talk today. I'm going to begin by talking about the seven dimensions of culture, and this comes from a book called Riding the Waves of Culture by Franz Tomperhans and Charles Hampton Turner. And in this book, they lay out seven continuums um, that you can sort of place yourself on. And I'm going to give an example of one of them. So, one of them is universalism versus particularism. So, a universalist will believe that the same rules apply in all situations, and a particularist will argue that it sort of depends on the culture. So, I want you to imagine this scenario. Imagine you are a school principal. And of course, your school has a rule that you are not allowed to bring cigarettes to school grounds. And of course, students who are caught with cigarettes will be issued a suspension. Well, let's say that you have a first grader who comes to school in the morning, gets to class, and the teacher says, "Everyone take out your binder." And the student opens his book bag and realizes, "Oh, shoot, I accidentally grabbed my dad's book bag. We got our book bags mixed up." And he looks in and he sees that he doesn't have the folder that he needs, but he sees that there's some cigarettes in the backpack. Now imagine he brings that to his teacher and he says, "Oh, Miss Smith, there was a mix up. I grabbed my dad's backpack, and I wanted to give this to you. It has cigarettes in it." This is brought to the principal, and the principal needs to decide, what are we going to do about it? If you are somebody who says, "Well, okay, listen, he's only in first grade and it's his dad's backpack, it's not his, and he was the one that turned it in. So nobody caught him with these things, like he actually found it and turned it in. And so therefore there should be no punishment for this child." Then you might be a particularist because you think it depends on the situation. If you, on the other hand, believe it does not matter, that student was in possession of cigarettes, and having cigarettes on school grounds is a violation, and the rules were made clear, and the punishment for that is a suspension, and so we should suspend that child for having cigarettes, then you might be a universalist. That is the type of thing that Riding the Waves of Culture discusses. And so there's seven of these. This is one of them, but there are seven of them that have a similar this or that. And neither one of those is the correct way of being. You might find yourself relating to one or the other, but that's the kind of thinking that they lay out. And so I want to experiment with this a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this link into the chat. And once you do that, you're going to be able to have access to this document. And this document lists all seven of the cultural dimensions. And what I want you to do is take a quick moment, and everybody should have editing access to this Google slide deck. And so take a moment, and for each one of the slides, pick a shape. You could be a circle or a rectangle or whatever you are, and put yourself on the continuum. So if you find yourself super duper universalist, then you might put your shape there. If you just think you're super duper particularist, you can put yours there. If you're sort of in the middle, you can put yours wherever you want to put yours. You can sign it if you want to sign it. You can just put a symbol if you want to put a symbol, wherever it is. But take a moment and go through all seven of these and place yourself on the continuum for all seven of these cultural dimensions. Okay, I'll bring us back together, and I would love to hear some share out. So feel free to use the hand raising function on Zoom or share in the chat. I'd love to hear why did you pick what you picked? Where was our group clustered mainly together? Where were there disparities? Did anything surprise you? If you were to complete this activity with the staff you work at with, where would everyone be? And what sort of implications does this have for group decision making? Feel free to reflect on any of those questions. Good point, Mark. Yeah. Go ahead. Come on.
Oh, was that me?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think there were interesting questions. I didn't think there was any right answer, but just some of the ones I reflected on were like, the question around to what extent do we control our environment? I just think our bias is like as humans, like what made us special is we kind of control our environment. I'm thinking just like literally we can build things and shape things. Um, and then the question around individual versus group, like I thought that was really interesting because I do believe like I strongly believe that hey, we should focus on what we can do as an individual, but also be in alignment with the goals of the group. So I don't actually see those as in conflict. But the way the question was posed, it was kind of a spectrum of individual goals versus communal goals. So I kind of put mine just in the middle because I think it's sort of a tension there. There's an interesting tension there between individual and group dynamics.
Definitely.
Kevin, to me this shows that when I think it's whether it's these seven dimensions of culture or another set of ways that we approach decision making or our environment or the context in which we're working. Um, I think it shows how we all come with really different values. And it makes me think about how that can make just group decision making really difficult, the ways that we communicate, whether emotionally or not, the ways that we feel agency over control over what's happening, all of that seems like it would play a big role in group decision making.
Yes, and not only do we all come to these with our own sort of ways of viewing the world, but we don't often realize that we see the world the way that we see the world. I'll tell you the one that really blew my mind is the one on time. So for me, had been raised in a place where like you get to the spot on time. You are there on time, and if you're not there on time, then that's a sign of being rude or that's a sign of whatever the case may be. It would never occur to me that there is another way to view time. And so I sort of thought that some people are good at that and some people are bad at that, but it never would have even imagined that some people aren't even playing that game. Like some people are just, they see it entirely differently. And so let's say you have an 11 a.m. and you have a 12 p.m. Like you've got an 11 a.m. meeting and you've got a noon meeting. If you're in the midst of your 11 a.m. meeting and the person is pouring their soul out to you, um, I had always thought, but you have to get to the 12 p.m. meeting because you have to do what's right to the person that you are meeting at 12. But what about the person that you're meeting at 11? Do you not owe them anything? And so anyways, there's just we all view the world in one particular way, but we may or may not realize that like that's just the way that we are viewing things, and other people see the world in different ways, and we may not appreciate that their way could be just as valid and just as right. I think one of the reasons that I think about this as when I think about group decision making is this to me both shows why groups decision making is so important and what makes group decision making so difficult. So I think about schools, for example. What if a school was made up entirely of universalists? to me, that school would be missing something. There would be something about that school that wouldn't be right. And so the universalists of that school could benefit from a particularist way of thinking. Or for any of these, there's if a school, and I'm thinking school, but you can think financial firm, you can think architecture firm, you can think construction crew, you can think in any sort of setting. If the team was exclusively effective, then you would be missing out on something. There would be the neutrals of the world have something to bring to the table that has validity. But if the group was entirely neutral, there would be that would also be missing something. And so I think this to me shows how, when Eric mentioned earlier that like, he might be going on one track and the group might help him realize, oh, the bigger question is this, that comes from when we all see the world differently. And so I think that is what makes group decision making so important is that it would be it would be both sad and not effective if we exclusively thought in one particular way. But that is what makes it so difficult because that's the way I think. Like I think this way, and it feels easier, especially in the moment, to be surrounded by people who sort of think the way you do, but you're missing that key point. Mark, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I was thinking about that partly for political discussions, especially having a family that's sort of half divided between MAGA and not. And from decision making, thought, well, you want to get people's different ideas and the hardest ones to, cognitively wrap your mind around are ones that are different than yours because you have to. But I started asking my brothers who have, split family relations because of their views, well, what do you believe? And then just listed them and tried to just take it. And it was like just having that different perspective made it, a civil conversation. And, for something like COVID between that, we had people, oh, we got to protect the teachers, stay out of school. And the conservatives were going, we got to get the kids back to school, masks and so on. They need to see the emotional stuff. And if we'd had a respectful discussion about that, those two viewpoints were both valid. So anyway.
Yeah, yeah, that's tricky. Yeah, but it can be difficult when you're in that moment to see the validity of the other side. But I think for me, what this activity does is it shows me the value of why working in groups is a beneficial thing to happen. But I want to be fair, and I also want to, be acknowledging this. Therefore, do you think everything should be done in groups? And I think that most of us would suggest that no, not everything should be done in groups. There is certainly validity to handling decisions in groups, and that brings, a certain amount of benefits, many of which we've already talked about today. But there are also trade-offs to making decisions in group, not the least of which is efficiency and those aspects as well. And so I just want to acknowledge that there is a trade-off there. And one strategy to occasionally use for effective group decision making is don't make it a group decision. That's not a solution to use all the time. And I think a lot of times we should be making more decisions in groups. But I just want to say that I don't believe that that's a universal thing and that we also have to acknowledge the trade-offs as in any way that we make decisions, there are pros and cons to the way that we make decisions. Okay, next, what I like to do is examine some classic studies in group decision making. The studies that we're going to study now were all conducted between 1913 and 1977. So they are not fresh off publication, but they, I think, do a lot to share about how our minds work in group decision-making processes. So in a moment, you're going to have the chance to select from one of 3 classic studies in group decision making, and you're going to join a breakout group for the study that you have selected. You'll read a 1-page description of the selected study, and then as a group, you'll have a discussion about that study and how you can use the findings to improve the group decision making for which you are a part. And then also during your discussion of when you're going to be discussing these, I would love if each group can identify one thing that they want to highlight. So you won't necessarily be able to read a transcription of everything that your group has talked about, but if you can identify one key thing that you'd like to bring to the whole group when we're done, and identify one person that's going to be the person who's going to share out. So these are the 3 groups. You're going to be able to learn about Ash, Ringelmann, or Ross. And if you feel like everyone seems to agree all the time and we're not having productive conflict, you're going to want to hear about Ash and the work that he's done on group decision making. If you're thinking about synergy, but you feel like your team is not synergist, and so, where, ideally you would want 1 + 1 to equal 3, but if you find that 1 + 1 equals 1.5, you're going to want to check out the work that Ringelmann has done. And if you have ever felt moments where you thought, wait a minute, I thought we were on the same page about this, but now I'm realizing that we're not on the same page about this, you're going to want to check out the work that Ross has done. So I'm going to share this now. The instructions are also in this document. So again, in a moment, I'm going to open up breakout spaces. You're going to be able to pick 1, 2, or 3, whichever one you feel like going to. And then all the experiments are described here. So if you pick the Ash study, you can read this page. If you pick the Ringelmann study, you'll read this page. And if you pick the Ross study, you'll read this page. And then also identify one either highlight or recommendation or things that came up from your group discussion. And we're going to take 9 minutes to do this. So we're going to come back at 12:40. So first I'm going to share that link. And now I'm going to, again, here are the 3 rooms. And while you look at these, I'm going to open the breakout rooms.
I think we need access.
Yes, I'm opening them now. And they are now open. So the rooms are now open. You can pick either 1, 2, or 3 based on the classic study you wish to explore. And hopefully everybody has the link in the chat. And I'll be popping in between the rooms.
Kevin, I think we need access to the document.
What's the document?
We just got it, I think.
Just updated it. We're good.
Perfect. Thank you for doing that. Great. So feel free to hop in the rooms and we'll come back together at 22. All right. Do we have somebody from the first room who wants to share either a highlight of their discussion or a recommendation?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Our group, which was 5 or 6 strong, had a good, robust discussion in which we discussed potential recommendations. And so just to set the stage, the room 1 was where you have a bunch of people who basically, so you have a situation where you have, call it 9 people in a room. One of them is a real participant. The other 8 are Confederates or fake. And the one who's real knows the answer, but sees all the others put in a wrong answer, and then they feel pressure. And it turns out 37% of the time they end up putting the wrong answer, even though they know what the right answer is. And so our task was, how do we mitigate this? And so the recommendation we stole from Otto, who dropped in the chat earlier, as we were talking about the exercise we did earlier with ranking where we lie across the spectrum of 7 different cultural areas, was anonymized. So if we had the participants in the study submit their answers anonymously, then that takes away the pressure to be in harmony because they're not hearing what the others have submitted. And then the other insight that came up in our group was the idea of potentially having different participants having different roles. And so I tied this to the concept of red teaming, where you have, like in an investment committee lens or in the military lens, you have a team that maybe is going in specifically looking for potential risks, and then maybe another that's looking for opportunities, right? So that also gets at that idea of mitigating the risk of all wanting to be in harmony because you have different roles.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Group One. That was a great summary and a great series of recommendations. And I think what's interesting there is like there are two practical strategies that came out of that that you as adults can use in your group decision making processes. You could also introduce this to students or kids in the groups that they're making. And so anonymizing the sort of people's initial thoughts, and then once everyone submits an anonymous answer, then all sharing those and having a discussion about it, as well as specifically designating people to be the, devil's advocate or the different roles that people can play. I think those are two great suggestions. I think one thing that I would encourage you to do is actually try them, because I think what's interesting is when we're in this sort of like academic setting and we're talking about groups sort of in general, it's easy to say like, oh yeah, I can see how that would be beneficial, but we all have blind spot bias. And so it's easier to see this in other groups, but we think our groups surely don't need this, right? And so, but it's important to actually say like, let's give this a shot and see what if this changes the way that we make group decisions. So, yeah, two very, very practical suggestions. Thanks for bringing those up. Room two, the Ringelman room. Who's sharing these thoughts?
Think that's me. So in room two, the study was the bigger the group, it seemed that the less the individuals would put in effort. Um, they used a term called social loafing, that if there were more people, maybe each person felt less accountable. So they didn't put in as much effort. So our project was to talk about how to motivate and coordinate better. And what we talked about was the group dynamics and how getting to know other people and getting to know and respect them, like the building of trust, is really helpful. We also like subcommittees just because it's less to coordinate and can be really productive. And it's really important to make the work visible, like who's responsible, who's ultimately, in charge, just make that transparent to the group.
That's
And
really awesome. Yes, great suggestions. Yeah, and so there is a point where groups could potentially be too big, and that makes it difficult for people to feel motivated and feel accountable. Plus the logistical challenges, as you mentioned, the coordination effort, and so yeah, all that can lead to some bad outcomes. And so sometimes the solution is shrink the group a little bit so that you still have the benefit of multiple minds on a problem, but it's easier to coordinate, and then also people feel more accountable towards the product that they're in. So yeah, those are things that, maybe if you're again as an adult, you can say like, I'm wondering if we can split off into subcommittees on this, or maybe we don't need 20 people to plan the next Friday's luncheon, or so yeah, like where can you get smaller on that? And then when you do have your teams, I think that's really interesting, and I don't know if that's been studied, is like if you have I'm sure it has, if you have a group of 8 who trust each other and a group of 8 that don't trust each other, does social loafing still exist? It sounds entirely reasonable to me that the trust would reduce the lack of social loafing. So awesome. Thank you for sharing that. How about Lee Ross, room number 3?
Oh, okay. So ours was if people were given a certain action or taken a certain position, they thought the rest of the group would follow that certain position. But the thing that the examples were, would you wear a sign that and go eat at Joe's and walk across campus? And you thought the people that did it thought that most of the other people would. And Celia in our group brought up that, well, that, these are sort of inconsequential decisions for political or other ones. Um, she thought it would be the other way around and stuff. And so that was one conclusion we came to. And then another one was, if we're doing this to get different opinions and stuff, we ought to give people enough time to look at the issues on their own before to come to some sort of a conclusion. So, and then I guess other things we had in the group from. So, we also, tried to do things so that we wouldn't anchor on the same thing.
That's good. Yeah, and I think some of the same thinking that goes into these broad political discussions amongst like various political functions also play out in the workplace. I mean, if we're deciding between are we going to launch product A or product B, you might think, well, we're going to launch product A and everyone agrees with me, right? And then you realize like, oh my gosh, no, half the company thinks we should launch product B. But if you, in your mind, think that there is consensus, that there actually is a consensus, that's worth sort of diving in and exploring. So, yeah, I think I can see it playing out the way you described it on sort of like a grand national political scale, but I also see it playing out in our day-to-day work too. And I think the same is true for students. If you're, you and your friends are debating, are you going to go to the football game on Friday or are you going to go to the movies? If you think, well, let's go to the movies, and everybody else probably wants to go to the movies too, you may be shocked that half your group wants to go to the football game. So, I do think it's important to sort of raise our assumptions and be able to just vocalize those and say, hey, y'all, my assumption is we all want to launch product A, but like, does that check right with you? And sort of like naming those that, could potentially give folks the opportunity to say like, oh, wait, no, I disagree. I actually think we should do B. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just along those lines, I was in like a gun control debate last week, and I was, preparing my points and stuff like that, which were spoke for understanding, not to win an argument. And but I was thinking, oh, giving all these points, thinking everybody would agree with me. And then we had like two other speakers that were like strong gun rights advocates and stuff. And I was thinking, I really ought to have taken the perspective of, what would people that disagree with me think and address those points. So, and a lot
I've
of,
definitely been in situations like that. I've absolutely been in situations where I think I'm giving an example that says one thing, but the example I chose, people see that differently than the way I choose, and it makes, yes, it's like I've seen those there. Well, wonderful. Well, I want to thank you all so much for participating today. This webinar was presented by the Alliance for Decision Education. And once this webinar finishes, we are going to send out a survey. It will be a very brief survey, and we want to know if you liked today's webinar, if you didn't like today's webinar, what could be better, what could be stronger, so that we know for the future. Please, when you get that, take just a quick moment to fill out the survey. That would be a wonderful help to us. And we'll also encourage you to sign up for the Alliance for Decision Education newsletter. It's a great resource that will let you know sort of what's going on in your organization and opportunities that are available to you throughout the entire year. That concludes our summer 2025 Lunch and Learn series. Thank you all so much for being a part of it, and we appreciate you giving your time to us today.